This week on Hometown Ghost Stories. In Trondheim, Norway, the past isn't just remembered, it's alive, restless, and constantly whispering back. From Kristiansten Fortress, haunted by shadowy soldiers and lingering screams, to Munkholmen, where spectral monks chant prayers to no one, the city is filled with hauntings. Yet nothing compares to Nidaros Cathedral, home to the infamous Bloody Monk, whose glowing eyes and grisly wound warn of doom. Join us as we explore the ghostly legends hiding behind Trondheim's ancient walls.
Hometown Ghost Stories contains serious and often distressing events and is not intended for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
Pastor Eriksson pulled his robe tighter around himself, a futile defense against the bitter chill that seeped into Nidaros Cathedral on this autumn night in 1861. Lantern in hand, he moved slowly down the dim corridors, the faint glow casting shadows that danced upon the cold stone walls. Though he had made these rounds countless times, tonight felt different, as if unseen eyes watched his every move. A soft murmur began to drift through the silence, barely audible at first, but gradually growing clearer. It was a haunting chant, beautiful, yet unnerving. Eriksson paused, ears straining. The chanting seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once, neither getting closer nor fading away. With a shaky breath, he pressed on, each step heavier than the last. The sound continued, guiding yet misleading him through the cathedral's vast interior. Turning a corner near the altar, Pastor Eriksson stopped abruptly, his blood running cold. Directly in front of him stood a figure cloaked in the robes of a monk, and they were stained, dark, with what appeared to be blood. The figure's face was pale, rigid, and stern, with piercing, glowing eyes that bore straight into Eriksson's soul. Across his throat was a horrific gaping wound that dripped slowly. The pastor's heart dropped. He had heard whispers about this figure, the Bloody Monk, as he was known, but he never believed them, until now. The monk stared silently, his glowing eyes filled with an unsettling intensity and a look of judgment etched upon his face. As the church bell suddenly rang, echoing through the cathedral, Father Eriksson blinked. The figure had vanished into thin air, leaving only darkness and silence. Sleep mostly eluded Eriksson that night, haunted by the image of the monk's ghastly wound and glowing eyes. When morning finally arrived, Pastor Eriksson awoke to frantic knocking at his door. Opening it, he was met with somber faces, bearing devastating news. A terrible fire had swept through part of Trondheim overnight, leaving several parishioners homeless and others gravely injured. As the grim reality settled over him, Pastor Eriksson felt the chill race down his spine. His mind flashed back to his encounter the night before, the Bloody Monk's glowing eyes burning vividly in his memory. Had the figure truly been an omen of the tragedy now before him? I'm Rob Coakley, and this is Hometown Ghost Stories, Trondheim, Norway. Trondheim was originally founded in 997 AD by Viking King Olav Tryggvason and rapidly developed into Norway's capital until the year 1217. Situated on the Nidelva River, it became a bustling hub of trade, culture, and politics. Olaf himself would die in battle in the year 1000. Noticing his army's defeat was coming, he jumped off his ship in full armor, opting to drown rather than to be taken and killed by the enemy. Throughout the centuries, Trondheim endured both flourishing prosperity and tragic setbacks. In 1537, the city faced a turning point as Norway embraced Lutheranism, dramatically altering religious practices and leading to the confiscation and destruction of many Catholic artifacts. Another devastating historical event occurred on April 18, 1681, when a massive fire razed much of Trondheim, prompting the majority of the city to be rebuilt. The aftermath would see the erection of Kristiansten Fortress. Kristiansten Fortress stands prominently atop a hill overlooking Trondheim, its imposing presence visible from nearly every corner of the city. Constructed between 1682 and 1684, it was commissioned by King Christian V following a catastrophic fire that devastated Trondheim in 1681. Its purpose was clear: to safeguard the city against future invasions, in particular from neighboring Sweden. And indeed, the fortress would prove its strategic value in 1718, playing a pivotal role by repelling Swedish forces during the Great Northern War and cementing its legacy as a symbol of strength and resilience. Yet, beneath its proud military history lies a darker, more sinister past. Kristiansten Fortress became notorious as a site of suffering, violence, and death, especially during periods of conflict. It served as a grim location for executions and imprisonment, its stone walls bearing silent witness to centuries of pain. The fortress' darkest chapter unfolded during the German occupation of World War II, when it was used to imprison Norwegian resistance fighters. Tragically, a confirmed 23 soldiers were executed within its walls, their lives violently ended. Today, Kristiansten Fortress remains infamous for its hauntings, as much as it is for its storied past. Visitors frequently recount encounters with spectral soldiers, shadowy figures seen pacing restlessly along the fortress walls, or standing silently, as if they're still guarding the fortress to this day. Cold, unexplained breezes brush past visitors, and many believe that they've heard whispers drifting through some of the empty corridors. The execution yard, however, is said to harbor the most unsettling paranormal activity. Many who have ventured there report feeling overwhelmed by inexplicable sorrow and fear. Ghostly apparitions have been seen appearing suddenly, only to vanish moments later into thin air. Visitors often speak of hearing anguished cries echoing from nowhere. Yet, even more distressing, some have reported feeling unseen hands push or pull them, as if warning or moving them away from an incoming attack. Munkholmen, a small island just a short boat ride from Trondheim shore, has a history about as inviting as a welcome mat made out of rusty nails. Its story dates back to Trondheim's founding. King Olaf marked his claim by placing the severed heads of rival chieftains on stakes around the island. This grim display was meant as both a warning and a demonstration of power. Things took a slightly less gruesome turn around the 1100s, when the island became home to a monastery. For a few centuries at least, monks replaced putting heads on spikes with prayers. Reformation rolled around in the 1500s, and the monastery was shut down. After that, Munkholmen transformed into a fortress, then eventually into a notorious prison, famous for holding political prisoners and criminals in grim, hopeless conditions. Today, it's a tourist destination and a place where the locals go to have a day trip. Unsurprisingly, though, all that dark history didn't just vanish into thin air. Today, visitors who wander Munkholmen frequently encounter ghostly reminders of its tragic past. Soft chanting can sometimes be heard through the island, believed to be the echoes of monks still praying centuries after their departure. Shadowy apparitions dressed in monks' robes have been spotted roaming the island, appearing briefly among the ruins before vanishing without a trace. The anguished cries and pleas of former prisoners has also been heard on the island, generally at night. Reports of shadow figures moving throughout the island, and a somber feeling has also been known to come over those that visit the island of Munkholmen. Yet, the centerpiece of Trondheim's supernatural reputation is undeniably Nidaros Cathedral. This magnificent Gothic cathedral was built upon the grave of Saint Olaf himself. Saint Olaf, originally King Olav Haraldsson, was a descendant of Trondheim's founder and became a martyr after his death in battle in 1030. The walls of Nidaros Cathedral have witnessed coronations, royal burials, fires, and countless restorations. With towering spires, intricate stone carvings, and an undeniable presence, the cathedral commands awe, yet beneath its grandeur lurks something darker. The most infamous presence haunting the cathedral is that of the bloody monk. He's unmistakable, dressed in traditional robes darkened by blood, with a ghastly deep wound stretching grotesquely across his throat. His piercing eyes glow with an unsettling intensity, leaving witnesses profoundly shaken. In 1924, Marie Glidich, wife of the Bishop of Nidaros, documented her chilling encounter, stating she had been up late in her chambers when she heard faint footsteps approaching. Curious, she stepped into the corridor and came face to face with the figure, and it turned out to be the bloody monk himself. She later would describe him vividly, noting his pale, anguished face, blood-soaked robes, and that hideous wound on his neck. Frozen in terror, Marie watched as the monk silently stared at her, his gaze cold, yet seemed as if he was pleading to her. In an instant, the figure vanished, leaving Marie shaken, convinced she had seen an omen of tragedy. A few years after the encounter, her husband, the bishop, would become ill and have to step down. Visitors to Nidaros Cathedral frequently report other spiritual activity beyond the bloody monk. Phantom organ music echoes at night, melancholy chants fill empty halls, and shadowy figures drift silently among the pews. In the crypt beneath the altar, many have encountered chilling drafts, ghostly whispers, and the unnerving sensation of being touched by unseen hands. And others who have visited believe that Saint Olaf himself sometimes appears, offering either silent reassurance or foreboding warnings to those who see him. Such frequent paranormal activity has made the cathedral a significant attraction for historians and ghost enthusiasts alike. Nidaros Cathedral isn't merely a monument to Norway's past, it's a place where history lives, breathes, and occasionally whispers back. Candles flicker, shadows sway. In Nidaros he walks to stay, a monk with robes stained deep and dark, wound wide open, a crimson mark. Glowing eyes pierce hearts with dread, watching closely, living and dead. Phantom chants float on the breeze, unseen whispers and desperate pleas. Protector bound or bringer of gloom, he haunts forever this sacred tomb. Inside stone walls where secrets lie, the bloody monk refuses to die.
What's going on, folks? Welcome into Hometown Ghost Stories, episode number 155, covering Trondheim, Norway, the bloody monk of Nidaros Castle. I'm Jesse Wilkins. I'm joined by Rob Coakley. Hello, Rob.
So I have a question for the both of you. I think the three of us do a really good job of hiding any sort of Boston accent that we have for the most part.
We do our
But
best.
when I'm recording like the opening audio, there's certain words sometimes where it just comes out of nowhere and it startles myself. So terror is one of them. Every time I say terror when I'm
Terror.
recording, I just go terror, and I just jump back. I'm like, oh my god, the spirit of Boston has compelled me into saying this word.
Does the Boston accent compel you to pronounce pasture?
Yeah, you know.
Yeah, it happens. It happens.
That's how they say it in Norway, Jesse.
Okay.
I know you're not cultured. But
I think some call me World Traveler Jesse.
Oh, okay.
Anyways, we're also joined by Pastor Dave. Hello. Pasture Dave. He's in the pasture.
Pastor Dave. Yes, thank you. My word is yesterday. I can't not say it without the middle R.
I hate it. It makes you jump back, and then you're just over focused on recording the word.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When I have a few drinks, Boston Jesse comes out sometimes. But other than that, I've worked in radio long enough to mask it. Although I don't really have much of a Boston accent anyways. I'm sure people who are listening that aren't from Boston are like, oh, these guys with the Boston accent. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyways, welcome into Hometown Ghost Stories, episode 155. Again, I want to give a big shout out to everybody who donated. Brenda C. came in with 50 Hometown Ghost Stories gifted memberships right off the bat. Always so generous, Brenda, always coming through, very consistent with those donations. Lockwood came through with 10. Blow Me in Chicago came through with 20. And then happy resub day to Velcro, Beth, and Blow Me in Chicago as well. So thank you so much for your generosity, and welcome in. If you got a gifted membership, make sure you say thank you, and swing it over to hometownghoststories.com if you want to get yourself some merch. You can get some fancy shirts or hats, sweatshirts even, stickers, cups, koozies, flashlights, whatever you like. Lots of good stuff, and some new merch coming out soon. Excited for that, for sure.
And thank you to our RIP of the week, KCW, for supporting the show as a VIP member of Hometown Ghost Stories. Shout out to one of our younger listeners, Sydney, who has not been feeling well over the last month. We hope that you feel better. And if you do join the Patreon, right, you get a bonus episode every single month. And last month, I believe, we looked at a bunch of terrifying commercials, and you can watch them with us and react and see our reaction to some of these very scary and spooky old commercials. And some are newer ones, but how they aired, we don't know. Go watch that episode if you haven't.
It's good fun. Always a lot of fun over on Patreon. If you can't support the show financially, that's okay. We appreciate you guys hanging out each and every week. Make sure you drop a review if you haven't already. A little 5-star on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Send us in your review, and we'll read it out on the show. Yes. Always good fun. It's also fun that we're covering Norway I believe this is the first time, right?
I'm scared to ever say the first time for anything now, because every time I do, I'm completely wrong. Mm-hmm. And we've already done something.
I don't think we've done Norway at all in any shape or form yet, but Demon King coming in with a $49.99 donation is Super Chat. You're an absolute legend, Demon. Thank you so much. Kicking off the show just the way we like it. This is good stuff. It's good stuff. Good stuff. So this was one of those where you sent me the write-up to record the intro for it, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, fuck you, Rob. I can't say any of these words. I had to look them up, and then there's also like no real sources on how to pronounce any of these words, so I had to look through.
You know what's annoying when you're looking to go to look up how to pronounce words is when you get the website that gives you a computer pronouncing the word. And it's like, there's no way this is right, because the computer is just pronouncing it the way the computer thinks it should be pronounced, and typically doesn't take like local dialect into consideration.
Yeah. You hear the computer say it, and you're like, that's not how I should do this. So yeah, find how the locals say it, and that's the best way to do it. But
these ones are hard to do too when you were looking up some of the videos, because you're just trying to listen to videos and they're not in English, so you're just trying to hope that you hear the word as well. You're like, oh, please say it, please say it, please say it.
Well, that's it too. And then it's also, there's the old pronunciations and the new ones, which have completely changed over time.
Yeah.
Like, it's Trondheim. Sometimes they pronounce it Trondheim. They're like, oh, wait, why? That's so much different.
Yeah, absolutely wild. So we have a lot to cover here as well. I picked for the opening the three most talked about haunted places in Trondheim, but we've got a few additional places to cover as well. And speaking of tough things to get into, let's just start getting into some of these. We're going to talk about Svergeborg, Trøndelag Folk Museum. I know those two words. So the Svergeborg Trøndelag Folk Museum, which is
Do you know the hack for writing words in Norwegian? You just let your cat walk across the keyboard and then deletes 90% of the vowels. And that's how you get towns in Norway.
yes. Send all your
That's
hate
how
mail
they-
to Dave, please.
That's how they came up with the language, actually.
Yeah.
Cats and keyboards.
Cats and keyboards.
The old trick.
So this folk museum is really cool. It sort of reminds me of Plymouth Plantation, where it's sort of it's like this outdoor open air museum with a bunch of different buildings from Norway's past. And they have over 80 historical buildings from various parts of the Trøndelag region. It offers a glimpse into Norway's past. And for the paranormal activity, some visitors claim to have seen apparitions dressed in period clothing, particularly near older structures like the Haltdalen Stav Church, which
That's
dates
it.
back to 1140 AD. There have also been reports of objects moving on their own and unexplained noises after dark. So I think this is a very cool one because we're bringing over 80 buildings from the historical region together. So they moved a bunch of the buildings into this one area. So, and as you just heard, one of them dates back to 1170 AD, which is
Pretty far
quite
back.
old.
For reference, that's one of the rare buildings that is older than Dave.
Yes.
It's crazy.
It's wild, actually. I actually think sometimes when buildings and areas have history that date that far back, it makes it harder to really talk about the haunted history of the place because records obviously weren't what they are today. I mean, we talk about how the 1800s records are tough to decipher. We go back 700 years prior to that.
Mhm.
And as you might have noticed with a lot of the stuff here in Trondheim, it's very vague and not mostly related to like a singular entity. Like they don't have like a particular story tied to it. I mean, some, as we'll get into Munkholmen, there's monks there, there's other history that happened there, but you don't have a lot of very specific events. So you're sort of just experiencing stuff that could have been happening for 600-700 years at this point. We just don't know how long the hauntings have been happening and who haunts and how many people haunt them. So I think a place like this open air folk museum with over 80 historical buildings is a prime location. I mean, talk about renovations. You're actually moving entire buildings to this one area, and you're probably stirring up a lot of stuff by doing that.
Yeah.
You know,
anytime.
the written historical records all the time, because although physical records get lost, usually the stories get passed down and they end up being somewhat of a legend. So you kind of got to take them for what it's worth, knowing that they're legend, but there's probably a shred of truth to every legend that gets handed down over the generations.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Where it's harder to pinpoint who was actually haunting this building when you have a house in like Massachusetts or in America somewhere, and it's 100 years old. You can usually narrow it down to 3 or 4 families, and only so many of those people might have died or might be haunting the building. So it's kind of easy to try to figure out who might be haunting a place. But when you have buildings like hospitals or asylums, then it's much harder to pinpoint it. And when you deal with things overseas that are 1,000 years older than the building that, that we're talking about in this country, then it's like, well, it could be any one of these hundreds of families and, dozens of people that might have died here. So it's very tricky.
Yeah. And those are a lot of the places we're talking about here. We're talking about forts. We're talking about a cathedral. We're talking about an island that was like a monastery at one point. So yeah, there are a lot of different places. Speaking of different places, Dave, do you want to tell us about the place that you have to tell us about in Trondheim? You're muted. You're still muted.
No, I know. I was trying to move my mouse cursor. It was it was being a real piece of shit. We figured it out. This place is called the Old Town Bridge, or as they say in Norwegian, something I can't pronounce.
Yes.
Give it a shot.
Nice job trying.
Gamly Bybro, I think it says.
That's what I am. I'm a gambly bro.
You are. But the,
Just a little bit of a gambly bro.
The historical
in Swedish, I'm sorry, in Swedish, gambly bro is actually just pronounced degenerate.
Yeah, that's true. Just with fewer vowels. But the historical background of the Old Town Bridge is that it was constructed in 1681 following the Great Fire of Trondheim. The old bridge was designed by General Johann Caspar von Sisignon as part of the city's reconstruction. It connects the city to the center of Backlandet neighborhood over the Nidaros River. The bridge has undergone several renovations with current structure dating back to 1861. So even though it was originally built in 1681, the current structure still goes back pretty far to 1861, which is confusing to my brain because it's the same numbers. Am I saying the same thing twice? And this bridge is allegedly haunted, which is why we're talking about it. So while primarily celebrated for its picturesque charm and dubbed Lycan's Portal or the Portal of Happiness, which sounds truly terrifying, the bridge is also shrouded in eerie tales. Locals recount sightings of shadowy figures emerging from the mist over the Nidaros River during late hours. These apparitions are often described as fleeting silhouettes that disappear upon approach. Some theories suggest these spirits are that of individuals who met untimely deaths in the river or remnants of historical events that transpired over the bridge. Yeah. So you get this a lot with water ghosts, and usually it's obviously people that died in the water.
Thanks, Dave. Really crushing it tonight. Jesus Christ.
To be fair, not all spirits are human spirits. There are sometimes non-human malevolent entities.
Could be fish spirits in the water, right? Fish that died in the water.
Could be.
Yep.
Could be. But I mean, Rob, you're laughing as if demons aren't a thing. Like, we don't talk about these non-human entities that predate human existence.
Yes, it was just your delivery, Dave. It was amazing. It was so good. I also think that something that we should talk about in relation to Trondheim is that fire in 1681 that leveled the majority of the city. And you see that a lot of the buildings that are there now are rebuilt because that fire leveled a majority of the city.
You see this a lot of time with fire ghosts. Is usually the ghosts of people who died in fires.
Really bringing the expertise today.
Yeah.
Much like water ghosts.
If you want to ever call the Hometown Ghost Stories hotline, you can get information like that for $3.99 a minute.
That's true.
So, and luckily it'll only cost you a minute because he'll say 8 words.
8 word sentences.
Yeah. So that's where we're at there. But I think that fire could have caused people to run toward the river. We see that a lot with fires where people are running towards water. They perish in the water because they're trying to escape the fire, which could have happened here. There's a lot of deaths tied into this fire. 1681, we don't have a lot of records on how many people or how for everybody that passed away in that fire. And I think a lot of the spirits throughout the city could be tied to that fire, amongst other things, because we are talking about a city that's been around for 1,000 years. 1,000 years for this city.
Could be Vikings. Founded by Vikings.
Yeah, what a badass that King Olaf was too, the first one. So there's 2 King Olafs, but the first one that founded the city, when he saw that he was going to lose the fight, he was on his ship in all his armor. He's like, now I'm just going to jump off this boat with all my armor on. That's how I'd rather go than be caught by the enemy.
That was the thing with Vikings, is it was more honorable to die in battle with weapon in hand to get into Valhalla. And if you were taken captor and taking you captive and they happen to take your weapon away, then it's, there was the belief that you wouldn't get into Valhalla. if you didn't have your weapon. So better to die on the battlefield or just jump in the water, I guess, with your sword or axe or whatever he was using. Oh, we have a.
Oh, what the fuck is this?
I accidentally typed yours wrong. I put Viking helmet instead, so I just left it. It's a true story. I'll have to raise this up a little bit.
Oh, that's phenomenal.
God. This episode is off
Couldn't
the
at least
rails.
put little horns on the Viking helmet.
And limited time here, Dave.
Little bicycle horns that honk.
There we go. Yeah.
So those are some of those stories. Jesse, I sent you one as well to read if you want.
Yeah, we can go over that real quick. So we had Stiftsgarden, which is the royal residence. So historical background. It was built between 1774 and 1778 by Cecil Christine Schola, wealthy widow and prominent figure in Trondheim society. Stiftsgarden stands as one of the largest wooden structures in Scandinavia, boasting approximately 140 rooms over 4,000 square meters. It's not square feet, it's square meters. Yeah. Initially, it was a private residence. It was acquired by the state in 1800 and has since served as the official royal residence in Trondheim. And there's also ghost stories attached to it. Surprise, surprise. So staff and visitors have reported unexplained phenomena within the palace's opulent halls. Accounts include sudden cold drafts in rooms that have no open windows, the sensation of being watched, and sightings of a woman in period attire believed to be Cecil Christine Scholar herself. Some tales speak of faint music echoing through the corridors, possibly linked to the numerous royal events hosted over the centuries. So you get your mixed bag of typical hauntings at this place, but obviously the sightings of the actual woman that could very well be Cecil Christine Scholar. And that's obviously the most alarming sighting is possibly seeing her full-bodied apparition. And then you also get the faint music that kind of echo through the corridors. I wonder what kind of music they're hearing. I'm assuming it's, well, actually this is 1774, so it could have been like Tupac, but could have been.
Yes. The Swedish Tupac.
Yes.
Or Norwegian Tupac.
Hell yeah. But they say that it could be linked to the numerous royal events. So I would assume they would have these lavish events with important people, and you'd have the band playing and Tupac.
Yeah.
So
gangster rap.
But that's a long list of hauntings that happen here. So cold drafts, old building, those things can happen, but they do go out of their way to try to debunk that by saying that there's no windows open when these cold drafts are experienced. The sensation of being watched, that's always impossible to debunk. And then, the other ones that we talked about. So your fair share of hauntings inside this building. And it's a massive building, 4,000 square meters. It's huge.
As I was researching some of this, I came across I don't know if you guys know Curtis Connor. I think I sent you a movie review that he's done before on YouTube.
I think so, yeah.
And he was reviewing the Viking lifestyle of current people on TikTok that live their lives like Vikings, and it's hilarious. He's pointing out this one particular guy who used to sing country songs, but he did a rendition of a song from from God of War, and was his biggest, most popular thing. So he transformed his entire life into being a Viking singer. And it's just hilarious watching him tear this guy apart. So I'll have to send that over to you guys later.
Hell yeah.
I'm going to push back a little bit on 4,000 square meters being absolutely massive. I mean, it would be a massive house, but if this is a castle we're talking about, it's actually on the smaller side.
Yeah, but what if it's 4,000 square electrical meters?
No, that changes everything.
I don't know what the difference is.
Electrical meter, like the meter on the side of your house that if you don't pay your electric bill, they come and shut it off.
Yeah. They come and pull it right off your house.
Popular form of measurement, yes.
And then when they pull off your house, they make a 4,000 square electrical meter house for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So
highly volatile.
All right,
Steph weighs in and says that's 43,055 square feet.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It is.
That's like 3 of my houses.
Which I think is slightly below average for a castle. I think castles range up to 510,000 square feet.
You and your
castle
stables.
shopping? How do you?
Get your tiny castle out of here. This doesn't even compare.
How do you know this?
I Googled it. It's in front of me here. The average size of a castle.
All right. Fair. Do we want to get into some of the stuff we covered in the opening here?
Yes.
So I think that we should start. Let's start with what you would see upon approaching this if you came by sea, which is Munkholmen or Munkholmen, whichever way you prefer to pronounce it, with a very storied history. Starts off with King Olav I putting his rival chieftains and enemies' heads on pikes on that island to warn whoever was coming. And then it takes like this drastic 180 turn and becomes a monastery for monks for about 400 years.
Mhm.
And then it does a 180 turn again. This thing is just 180ing all over the place like Tony Hawk. And it becomes a prison for regular criminals and political prisoners as well for a number of years. So very vast, different things on this island, and the hauntings could be attributed to any of them or all of them. There have been
Or none of them.
apparitions of, or none of them.
It's interesting because when you think of cathedrals and churches and holy places, monasteries, whatever, you think that the majority of those would probably, if you're religious, you'd think they would be safe from hauntings or demons or anything like that because it's, a house of God or whatever. But if you look at the history of this place and you think of, first of all, the cathedral was built on top of Olaf's grave. And then you talk about
that's Nidaros Cathedral.
Right. Well, that's what I'm talking about. But
yeah,
even if you go back to this place or whatever, if you talk about the buildings, you said that there was basically used for monks for a long time. You have your holy buildings. But if you think of the storied past with this place, where it was heads on spikes, place of war, prison, all these different things, and then they change over. When I think when these things flip flop, the history of these locations and what's embedded within the stones and the earth around it, I think that these could lead to hauntings regardless of if it's a holy place or if it ever was a holy place. So
yeah,
it's interesting to think about.
The Germans even occupied this island for a little bit during World War II. I mean, they occupied a ton of Trondheim in general, but this island, they set up a small base for, I think it was a submarine base that they set up there as well. So there's just so many different uses for this island over the years. It's just wild.
And regardless if it's just like a submarine base, there's not a concentration camp there or anything like that, but that doesn't mean that atrocities weren't happening to the locals. You see this all over the world with every country that the Nazis took over. They were just bullying the hell out of the locals, killing people. There were penalties if they were to assault an officer. So like if you were to assault like one German officer, they would just wipe out, 50 of your local villagers or whatever. So there was probably a lot of atrocities that were going on there as well. So who knows? There's just, and that's just one of the periods of time, one of the many violent acts that happened on this land.
Yeah.
Over 1,000 years, more than that.
So some of the hauntings associated with this place, people believe that they hear monks praying when they're on the island, which is, I don't know. There's monks praying and then there's prisoners screaming. And I don't know which one I'd rather hear if I'm on the island by myself at night.
How do you tell the difference?
Well, if it's alive monks, then that's fine. But I mean, chanting is very ominous sounding anyways. If they're doing, I don't know what Norwegian monks do, but I don't know. All of that sounds creepy. I would say the screaming is still got to be more jarring if it's screams from a ghost, right?
Probably initially jarring. Probably more initially jarring. And like the ominous humming and praying would probably be scarier over time.
Well, if you think about it, if you're hearing the ghosts of dead monks praying, doesn't that mean if their souls are still here on earth, doesn't that mean their prayers didn't work?
Could be something residual.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Could be a residual haunting.
Could be.
400 years. I mean, again, time is so different at this place. 400 years as a monastery, and there's still 600 other years of history attached to it as well. So, we have to take that into account as we're talking about this place. And speaking of the Germans, we should probably cover Kristiansten Fortress real quick, which is a really cool looking fortress. If you were watching the video, you could see that it actually does overlook the city, and it overlooks Nidaros Cathedral that we'll be talking about in a few seconds. But its history dates back to the fire of 1861. God, I just did it. 1681.
Yep.
and it's seen its share of battles. It finally did get overtaken by the Germans in World War II, and unfortunately, they did execute 23 Norwegian soldiers within the walls of this fortress. So, again, seen a lot of battles, seen a lot of executions, seen a lot of death. Probably a little bit of a different feeling than the island, I would say, most of the time, because this just feels all depressing. So you're probably getting a real somber haunting, as people have seen. The one haunting of this that I found different than anything that we've seen, not that the ghosts touch people, we've seen that in multiple places, but it's reported that the ghosts feel like they're either pushing or pulling people out of the way of something. And I'm wondering if that's sort of, they're pushing or pulling them out of the way of like a firing squad, because it's when they're within like the where the firing squad
the area
would
where the executions took place. That's an interesting theory.
yeah. So that was what really caught my attention with this place more than anything in terms of the hauntings.
For sure. I mean, any physical altercation is jarring. People getting pushed by ghosts or poltergeists or something demonic or whatever is always alarming. But this one, I think you might be onto something there. Like, get out of the way. Execution's going on here. You don't want to stand there.
Yeah, because it's in like that courtyard area, like that you saw towards the end of the video, where that's where a lot of people feel like the presence of, they feel the somber feeling. That's where a lot of the hauntings seem to be tied to, is that area, which is most likely where the executions took place. I would just looking at the fortress, it's relatively small, and that seems like if you were going to do something like that anywhere, that's where you would do it. It's
right.
It's got the visibility to have others like for the other soldiers to watch, for everything to go down. So I'm assuming that's where it is, and just very, very different. And it's something I want to look out for when we're covering other military stuff, like in terms of like the physical touches. It seemed like they're trying to warn them or move them out of the way of where something happened. So something to look to as we go forward, covering more places like this as well.
Yeah, not something to look forward to. Regardless if they're pushing you out of the way of a would-be ghostly execution, I still want to get pushed by. I kind of want to get pushed by a ghost, but most people would not want to get pushed by a ghost.
No.
I don't think.
I never want to get touched by a ghost again, to be perfectly honest. Never want that to happen again.
Chad is wondering how many castles have a percentage of quartz in the walls, and I'm assuming the reason for that question is because quartz is one of those natural materials that retain energy, which is a theory for why things sometimes are haunted, because if energy is retained in those walls. You may have heard of that stone tape theory.
Yeah, there's a name for that theory. I think it's called the stone tape theory.
And a lot of castles are more commonly built with sandstone, but then there's also this thing called castle quartz, which a lot of castles are also built with, but that's not pure quartz. It's usually adulterated with other things in it. So it's usually like a lot of concrete has quartz in it, but it's not pure quartz. So to answer the question, yes, there's quartz, but it's not unadulterated quartz.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, chat brings up limestone. Limestone is another one.
Mm-hmm. Granite.
Yeah. And not to be taken for granted is Nidaros Cathedral.
Do that.
So let's talk about Nidaros Cathedral, because it is beautiful. I think this is my favorite looking cathedral that I've ever. I mean, there's some really, really good ones, but some of the stonework on the outside and inside of this building, I don't know if as you guys were watching the video, you saw a lot of the carvings on the outside of that. I think it's the westward wall of all the different people on it. It's super cool. But this thing started construction in 1070. Do you guys want to know when it completed its initial construction?
Oh, do we get to guess?
Yeah, take a
It
guess.
started in 1070. It completed in 1170. Let's say 100 years.
Jesse, you want to take a guess?
1992.
1300. 1300 was when it completed its initial construction, and there's been a ton of work to it over the years. So it does, if you look at drawings and photos of it through the years, it just, you could see the difference, you know, every century over century. It's been built up so much. But it was originally built over the grave of Saint Olaf, which is Olaf II, who was basically a martyr. People, like, he was very beloved, and he became a saint like a year after his death. He was already put into sainthood. Like, it was like rushed. It was like, we got to get him into the Hall of Fame now.
Hall of Fame of Saints.
We got to put Saint Olaf up in the rafters immediately. That number is getting retired, you know, the next season.
Get him his banner.
Yeah. So some would say, you know, like, he's like the Michael Jordan of saints in that sense.
Yeah.
Munkle Jordan.
Michael Jordan.
Doesn't have a ring to it. I don't think that nickname will stick. No. We'll move on.
Put that one aside.
Olaf Jordanson is the way that it would be in Norwegian, probably. So it's built, from what I could see, though, they don't, after Lutheranism took over, where his exact grave was sort of lost. So it's somewhere within or on the outskirts of the cathedral, but we don't know exactly where, from what I understand. But he's buried there somewhere. So his spirit is thought to linger within the cathedral as well. But he is not the most prominent ghost in this place. And the whole reason for this episode is the most prominent ghost in this place. And that is the Bloody Monk.
Do they have an identity on who they think this Bloody Monk could have been?
No. And looking through to see if there's any possible link to who the monk could be, a lot of people that don't believe or try to debunk it push back on the fact that monks, demonking.
Glad you got that in there. It's the most important joke of the night.
Yeah. Anyone that tries to demonk this situation is they look back, and the cathedral was never a home to monks. And to me, I'd say, okay, there's no monks that ever practiced in this cathedral, but the cathedral is 1,000 years old, and we have evidence that there was a monastery right off the town or right off the city for 400 years with a group of monks. So there were monks right there. We don't think a monk ever could have passed through at any point in time and been in there, and something could have happened and we just don't know about, or been brought there. We don't have insane historical records. The entire city burnt down in 1681. So maybe there was a monk there at that point in time, right? And couldn't make it to the cathedral, or saw that was the last thing he saw. There's so many different reasons why a monk could be there, but it does look like something tragic happened to him, because he does have the gash on his neck. And that seems to be the overlying thing. And the most prominent sighting was in the 1920s by the bishop's wife, who went on record and described her encounter with the Bloody Monk. And this is the bishop's wife. So it's pretty bold for her to make this claim that she saw this while within the cathedral, because her husband's reputation is sort of on the line at that point of seeing a spirit within the cathedral. And
this is the 20th century, right? This isn't like 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, 1920s.
Yeah.
So also, for those of you, if you go and you try to research the Bloody Monk and you look up this, you're going to incorrectly see from a lot of different sources that it was the bishop, Marie, that was the one who saw this, and
Nope.
as I was talking about this with Dave a couple days ago, because I was asking him to fact check me on some things, we think what happened with this is, Dave brought this up, it's a great point, is there's just a translation error, and because it's the wife, she was also probably referred to as like almost like Mrs. Bishop. So
Yeah,
some sort
a
of
lot of the back then, even nowadays, sometimes like if there's a married couple, the wife will just carry the husband's title. Like for instance, Kate, my wife, would be Mrs. David Wilkins, formally, technically. So that could have been a translation thing there. And also, I think the first female bishop was, I believe, in the 1980s. So
yeah.
it wouldn't have made sense back then for there to be a female bishop.
Yeah. So it was definitely the wife. The timeline matches up, the name matches up, everything matches up.
Mhm.
So while she was up one night, she heard somebody walking somewhere they weren't supposed to be walking. She got curious. She went and walked, and she laid eyes on this bloody monk, and like had a very good description of him where he was wearing monk's clothing, covered in blood. There was a gaping wound on his neck, and one of my all-time favorite descriptions, the one thing I never want to see, is that glowing like piercing eyes that almost just capture your gaze to almost hypnotize you.
Mhm.
So that's the other thing that she saw with him as well before he eventually disappeared. And people have two interpretations of what this bloody monk does. They either think that he's bringing you a bad omen, or that he is there to bring you good tidings. So it's back and forth on what it could be. Now, her husband did get sick, but it was a couple years later. He was only the bishop for the church for about 5 years before he got
Hang on,
sick.
before we move off the presentation of this ghost,
Sure.
right? Whether it's good or bad, if you're showing up with a gaping neck wound, covered in blood, with horrifying white eyes, like, don't be scared, bro. Like, I don't think there's no good way. Like that's a
No, I think the only way to look at this would be, why is a monk haunting in the first place? And my theory on this would kind of be the same sort of story as the Black Monk of Pontefract, where this was probably a monk who did something wrong, something unholy, got himself executed, and that's why he's haunting. So chat's kind of going back and forth about religion and stuff like that. Let's try not to get too much into that because that could turn into an unfriendly conversation. But I think if you're going to take the look at it from a religious standpoint, this would be, he was violating some sort of rule. There's lots of rules that monks could break, and was executed for his crimes if he was committing crimes. And then this is why his ghost is still haunting. If you're looking at it from a non-religious aspect, it's a lot easier for this ghost to be haunting.
Well, even if you're looking at it from a religious aspect, what religion would that align with, where your spirit is still trapped on earth?
I don't know. I don't want to get too much into religion here. That's not what we do on the show. But the idea that he could be haunting could be any list of reasons. But I would think that the reason that he's presented as such, where he has an open neck wound, it just sounds like an execution to me. So it sounds like he did something wrong. He was executed. His ghost is haunting. If it's all true, then his ghost is haunting, and he's presenting himself in his final form, which would have been that if he was executed. Like
self-termination would be yes,
or some sort of a fight, some sort of battle, got his throat slit. But
Or it's a misinterpretation is the other thing I thought of, where it might not be a monk at all. We are talking about a city that goes back 1,000 years. Someone wearing some sort of robe, some sort of beggar robe. We've seen those outfits that could be misinterpreted as a monk outfit. Could possibly be the person as well.
Right. You got to think, I mean, it's just a robe.
Right. It's just a robe. So
it depends on the exact description that people are seeing this at. Real quick, before we get too far off it, I want to say thank you to Below Me in Chicago, who threw $5 in Super Chat. Tess P came in late, but she came in with $50 donation in Super Chat. And then Brent from the Paranormal Portal gifted 10 Hometown Ghost Stories memberships. Thank you guys so much for hanging out and being so generous. Very nice of you. If you haven't already, go listen to Paranormal Portal. It's a good show.
Yeah. So there's so many different things that could be, because we don't have an exact history of who this person could be. So that's why, who knows? Could have been a beggar, could have been a monk. The description is a monk, but it's a robe. And It could have just been like a beggar's tunic or a regular tunic at that point in time. Who knows? Like we hear what happens a lot is we hear one person's interpretation, and because they have the most distinct visual representation of what they saw, we take their word at 100%, and rightfully so, but we don't think beyond what their description is. So because it was described as a monk, we don't ever take a step back. Well, we usually don't take a step back and be like, okay, well, they saw this, but that could also be interpreted as this. We just sort of always run with that initial description, right?
Yeah.
And then that sort of becomes the fact.
Absolutely. And to go back to it a little bit, I don't want to dive into a debate here, but I mean, all religions recognize some sort of demonic possession. So there could be something demonic that you're seeing there. It definitely is presenting itself as something terrifying. And most religions do acknowledge spirits and ghosts. I mean, hell, you have the Holy Spirit in Christianity, right? So there's plenty of things that line up with that haunting. But the bigger thing that confuses me is the location, right? Because typically churches, cathedrals, these things don't typically get recognized as haunted until usually when they're abandoned and things aren't being practiced there anymore. You did have the cathedral, the San Fernando Cathedral in San Antonio that we covered that's supposed to be haunted. There's plenty of haunted churches out there, but I do feel like it's more rare than your typical building.
Yeah, well, yes, but when they're this old, again, 1,000 years of history, who knows what happened within these walls over the course of 1,000 years?
Exactly.
Building. I mean, this thing took 8 million years to build to begin with. There could have been accidents that happened during the building process that we don't know about. The renovations are constant here. So it's just, there's so many different reasons there could be hauntings within this cathedral. And then you tie in 1,000-year history rather than like a 50-year history. And the options are sort of limitless of what could have happened within these walls over the years.
$10.01 in super chat from Whisper. Thank you so much, Whisper. Brent brings up a good point. He says, I have heard that when Catholic churches are decommissioned, the sanctification of the church is released via some sort of prayer or ritual. So that might explain why some of these abandoned church or former churches do end up getting haunted. But that's, I guess, only if you believe in the stuff. So very interesting topic.
Yeah. I want to talk about one last place, and I just saved this for last because this is the Archbishop's Palace, which is located right next to Nidaros Cathedral. I saved the best one for myself. The actual name of it is Erksbyspar Garden.
Got it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So located adjacent to Nidaros, the Archbishop's Palace is one of the oldest secular buildings in Scandinavia, once serving as the residence and administrative center for the Archbishop.
Wait, the Archbishop's building is secular?
That's what it said. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I didn't write it. I pulled it. I pulled this information.
He's a secular archbishop. I'm an archbishop, but I'm not religious.
That's not what it is. A secular building is just something that's designed for non-religious purposes. So it wasn't like, it's not supposed to be like another church or something that holy practice are going to happen. It's just his apartment, basically.
Yeah, it's a palace.
Okay.
Yeah. So ghostly encounters for this place is staff and visitors have occasionally reported cold spots, especially in the older sections of the secular palace. It didn't say that. I just wanted to throw that into Upset Dave again. Some have experienced the sensation of being watched, and a few have recounted sightings of a shadowy figure believed to be a former resident or cleric. So that is right next to Nidaros Castle, and you can a lot of pictures, depending on the angle that you take, you can see it in there as well. Gotcha. And a big shout out to Matthew Thomas for donating $50.01, and he says there can only be one demon monk to lead them all, which is right. Absolutely correct. So thank you so much to Matthew Thomas, and we'll have to reach out and let you know our plans when we get to Ohio. They're tight, but we'll try to grab a drink. So,
I mean, $50 donation from Matthew T. I'm sure that's what you were just talking about. Sorry, I had to let the dog out real quick, but thanks, Matthew. That was huge.
Yeah. So that is Trondheim, Norway, and a bunch of different haunted locations in Trondheim. So any last thoughts from either of you guys on Trondheim?
No, this is great. I love the older stuff where there's just so much history, and a lot of it's open for interpretation because of what you talked about earlier, that their record keeping just doesn't hold up over the centuries that this place has been.
Centuries and fires and natural disasters and wars and you name it, it's been there, and records.
It's left up to us for to interpret it all, figure out what it means.
Yeah, got to find the stone tablets that they wrote things on back in the day. So very cool. It was a last minute pivot. I had another story I wanted to tell. We'll tell that story in the future, but it was really sad. And I let Discord choose this week, by the way.
That's right.
I went into Discord on Saturday and I said, do you guys want Norway or do you want Minnesota? And they chose Norway. So we did Norway, which was great because I had to change all my research 3 days before the episode. I loved it. It was awesome. So good.
You asked for it.
I did ask for it. I did.
But
I don't have, it was fun. I don't have any Apple reviews today. Jesse, were you able to get any of the Spotify reviews?
No, they hit me with that password thing, and I haven't been able to log in yet. So
yeah, we got to review.
We'll do that next week.
Where'd you send it?
We got a couple of reviews actually, and if we have those on hand, we can do it.
Well, why don't we get into our Patreon names in 1 second here?
I got it. You're right there. This is from Nathan. Said wanted to reach out and say I absolutely love what you guys are doing. I have been listening for like 9 hours a day, 5 days a week for a couple months now at work, and this has become my favorite podcast. Me and my two best friends are going to take the trip to Draper Cabin in Martinsville, Indiana. So thank you, Rob, Dave, and Jesse, for the awesome work and you guys do. And I'll let y'all know how the trip goes. So awesome. Thank you, Nathan H, for that review. If you don't have Apple reviews or Spotify, you can always email us like Nathan did, or send us messages on Discord or whatever if you want to leave a review and hear it read out on the podcast.
We don't always reply, but we always do read it. So you're not sending. We just sometimes a lot of the behind the scenes stuff of the show gets very busy and we just can't.
Sometimes we have 72 hours to put together an entire video. So
yes, exactly.
So up into our patrons real quick, starting with the VIPs. We have Justin West, Jay Gooch 725, Jennifer A, Jeremy M, KCW, Brandina 77, Kathy F, Kitten Clown Dozer, Ghost Nurse JP, another Vice. Dave has a new kangaroo onesie with a bottom flap. West Virginia coal miner Tess. Plot twist: Tupac's older than Dave.
He is.
He is actually.
He is older.
Kate and Steve M, Sharon V, Glitter Tees, Cami from Washington, Kelly C, Nick, Liz Young, Donnie N, Inspires Gaming, Allison V, Robert H, Anna C, Jeannie, Mom and Pops W, Father Squatch, The Elder, Lisa J, and more disappointing than Plymouth Rock, which is hard to do. Went and saw that today, actually. Fun fact.
We're there just before the show.
Just before the show. Yes.
Another shout out.
Sorry. I was going to say, actually, every week we go to Plymouth Rock right before the show as a ritual.
It's a ritual. We just got to get bored to death and have a big letdown before, but no, we had to do it. Sarcastically, we have Tony and Georgie are in town with brother Seth, so we figured we'd take them to go see the great. Some call it the 10th wonder of the world. Some call it a relatively small rock.
Yes.
Yes.
Those people are no fun. Let's hop into
real quick. I want to give a bonus shout out to KCW again, who is the RIP of the week. So just wanted to get through that one more time. KCW. Sorry.
Yes. The Warren's words. Let's start with West Mass is the best mass. Degenerate gambler, voodoo ghost who shouldn't have hit.
Hold on.
Hey, this is a Patreon number.
Even exists. Prove it even exists.
Sometimes I hear about towns, they're like, oh yeah, and then Shrewsburyville, Mass. I'm like, where the hell is that? It's Western Mass. That's why I don't know about it.
Yeah, let me tell you a quick story about Western Mass. All right. I was working in Western Mass a number of years ago, and I was doing some work on a telephone pole when the resident came out. He drove up on what I believe was the first four-wheeler ever invented. I think it was made out of wood with wood wheels. This thing was crazy. He had a sidecar, but he had his dog running next to it, so he didn't even have his dog in the sidecar. And he comes up and he starts talking to me all crazy. And then he points up to the transformer on the telephone pole and he's like, do you know what that does? And I'm like,
except he said it in his Western Mass accent.
Yeah, Western Mass accent.
You know what that is up there?
You know what that is up there?
You know what that is up there?
That does? Yeah. And I was like, yeah, it's a transformer. He goes, you know what it does? I go, yeah, I know what it does. I work on telephone poles. Of course I know what it does. He's like, that's what gives you cancer. I'm going to go get my shotgun and shoot it right now. And he rode off on his 1765 four-wheeler to go get a shotgun to shoot the transformer.
1765
Did you wait
four-wheeler
around?
was called a wagon.
Well, I had to call the police, and the police yelled at him furiously because they were the exact quote was, "Don't screw this up for us. We finally need to get internet out here."
Oh no.
Police came out and were like, cut it out, Bruce.
Yeah, that's exactly what they did.
Pretty much it. That's pretty much it. Next up, we have Jamie E. Nick M. T-Cat Whisper. Jeremy M. Beth C. Apple Steph. Rachel G. Sarah B. Her Lady Spookship. Victim of Ohio. Megan S. Eugene M. Colby R. Oh, I'm sorry. That's Colby Remembers. I like that. Kath Q. Chris Connolly, LBPS founder. Next HTGS guest. The other Rachel B. Sarah Cook. Janice G. Mar Fire. Anthony. Hey, do y'all reckon each of Dave's alter egos will split and haunt different locations or just congregate to torture Rob T? Like
It's
that.
It's fun to think about.
There'll be a Whiskey Dave will at least be in a bar.
True.
Yeah.
Rob's ghost will not be in a bar.
As long as it's not Cyclone Dick Dave that comes and haunts me. I'm
Gotta be
good.
careful of that. Yeah. I don't even remember that reference, but it sounds alarming. Water demons kill you with 4,000 giggling meters.
Yes.
I may be sick, but I can still plot Dave's demise.
Good.
Oh, no.
We do
That's
hope you feel
Sydney?
better soon. Yeah, that's Sydney. Math Wizard Steph A and Steph on guitar. My dog is just making weird noises. What?
Yes. So thank you to our $10 tier, the Warrens Wards.
Yes. And next
Yeah.
up, we'll hop
And
into the
get
ghost.
well soon, Sydney, even though you wish for my demise.
Yes. Yes. Hopefully you do get better soon. All right. We have Cole to the Miscellany, G.O.B. Cora H, Grim B, D, the Lobster Dancing Banana Land Dinosaur Monster, Susan C, Just Ghostly, Witchy Kitty 416, Deb 62, Karen L, Michael M, Amber R, Brant C, Mrs. Nardozzi, Shane O Mac, Joe, Trevor S, Christina S, Kate C, Kelly C, boop, boop. Crazy Legs, Cowboys are the worst franchise ever. Miss Macabre, Michelle Naroku, the Mad Gasser of Methuen.
Mad Gasser Mattoon.
No, it's Methuen.
Oh, Mattoon. Mattoon.
So much scarier.
It is actually scarier.
The Debunked Monk of Ohio. We like to call that demunked. D from H-Town, Meta A, Monster Mom 04, Wicked Alley, Dark Snark. I think the second toe is better than the middle finger. Think of how much more insulting it is to get toed off. I like that. Megan S, Arcade Hunters, Wayne C, Rana Gilar Varmukov Slutar with mayonnaise.
Yeah,
That sounds Norwegian.
I don't
It
like
does.
it. Whatever it is, no man.
No idea what I just said. It's probably extremely offensive. Crystal Quinn, aka Not a Rob fan, Thick Boy Freddy's baby mama, was definitely yeeted. Alicia E. Thick Boy Freddy is still kicking, but dead on the inside after seeing Marchand, after seeing Brad Marchand in a Florida jersey warming up on the Spoked Bee. Sad to see.
It was very sad. We don't like that.
No. Dave's propeller Viking horn helmet. You know what I will say for Marchand is I hope he gets another ring because Florida's
Same.
actually a good team and Boston is not right now. Sam from Nepal, Joe R, Al Capone, Huggy Bear. Great lasagna is great and bad lasagna is bad. Facts. Solar Flare Mariah M. Next up, we have Kira Lee J, Cody G, Hooply Whooply, Birthday Witch, and Lieutenant Hitchcock Butt Chapel. Love that. Yes, thank you so much for being on Patreon, and a huge shout out to everyone who donated. This is a massive stream again. Brenda C, Lockwood and Company, Blow Me in Chicago, Demon King. Who else do we have? Chicago again, Tess P, Paranormal Portal, Whisper, and Matthew T. If I missed anybody, sorry, but thank you so much for those donations. You guys are absolutely amazing. That'll help out. We got a couple trips coming up, bunch of big investigations.
Yes.
We'll keep you guys posted on all of those. So some good stuff.
Big things. Big things.
Big things going on this year for our hometown.
Throw these out one
ghost
more
story.
time
Hells yeah. There
while
it
we
is.
wrap it up. Anything else, gentlemen, before we sign off?
No, that's going to do it for me.
All right, cool. Well, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will catch you guys next time for another episode of Hometown Ghost Stories. See ya.
Peace.